Okay, so we have William with us today, and William has been speaking to a race called the Zeta race via medium Paul Hamden in Queensland, Australia. And so, William, maybe tell your story, how you came to do what you do and how you came to speak to the Zetas.
Okay, it started back in 2012. I heard about Paul when I attended a seance with Kai Meg in Spain. Someone there told me that knew of my interest in unidentified flying objects and the ETs, and he suggested I talk to Paul because Paul was already in contact with him. And so when I got home, I gave him a call, and we began a relationship that continued for about 6 years, I think. And during that time, I collected a lot of transcripts of interviews with the Zetas speaking through Paul. And a lot of them were something, well, I'm not sure what the proportion is, but I carried out a number of interviews remotely, and I also went to Australia to be with Paul and talk to them directly. And we ended up writing books about the interactions. They're on my website, and I think you probably have the link. The project's pretty much over now, and I think that they had a purpose to give us some information, and that was accomplished. And the information is out there now, published. And now they don't talk to us anymore, so it must be over.
Don't they speak via Paul at all anymore?
Paul has gone off in a different direction, and
spirit people. Yeah.
He's not really holding circles anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so he can't by himself. He can't interview them. He has to have somebody with him.
Yeah.
So he still has contact with him, but there are no questions being asked.
Oh, okay. So the subjects we picked for today was NDE and realms, different realms, and what realms do we actually enter when we have an out-of-body experience or when there's an NDE. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell us about these subjects, about especially the different realms and how they explain why they're different, how they interfere with each other, and where we actually go when we have an out-of-body experience or when we're dying, or an NDE?
The thing is, I have to get a little technical to do that.
Okay.
If that's okay, because if I'm going to explain how it's done, then you have to understand a little bit about the nature of reality. And,
okay.
It's quite different from what most people imagine. And so you have to sort of bend your mind around another way of thinking. And it begins by recognizing that all we really have to work with are our sensations. That's what enters our mind, and we construct the reality based on those sensations. And so what we really live in is a mental universe. We live in a context where all that exists is some form of thought. So it's a configuration in an energy of consciousness that we can manipulate if we know how. I guess there are certain properties that the consciousness has that allow us to do that. So I can talk about the most important ones, just to get us going. For one thing, the energy of consciousness has a property of vibration. And vibration is a dimension. It goes from it's low to high, and so it can be of any value. And the lower dimensions, I think we're probably all familiar with this concept that, of vibration, that the low vibrations are emotions like fear and anger and that kind of stuff, sadness. And the higher vibrations are gratitude, unconditional love, and that kind of thing, and anywhere in between. Okay, so that's the property of vibration is what gives us the various realities that we want to talk about, because each reality is in a different place along this dimension. And then there are a couple of properties that are intrinsic to consciousness, and one of them is the ability to create using our thoughts. And I'll explain why we can't do that very easily, here and where we are. But when we leave this place, the ability to manipulate our reality with our thoughts, it will become easier. What the creation process does is it configures consciousness, the vibration of consciousness where you're at. It's anywhere on that dimension. It's modulated by the thought that you're experiencing, and a representation of that thought is then placed in consciousness separate from you. They call it a grid, and it's a good way to think about it. But you have to remember that it's an analogy for what's really there. And so the grid then gets populated by all kinds of creations that are made by various beings. And you can only experience the creations that at your level of vibration, or possibly lower. So there are lots of things going on in the universe or in the cosmos that we can't experience because our vibrations aren't high enough. To go along with this is an intrinsic perceptual process. And this is something that we can do. Each one of us has the perceptual process that operates at the level of vibration that we're at. And so you can, in our realm, we call it the etheric realm, we can experience creations that someone has created here for us. So there's no getting around it. You can call it God if you want, but back at some point, some being created this etheric realm. And I think my understanding of it is that it began with probably the way we understand, the physicists understand, astrophysicists understand the beginning of the universe. It may not have been the Big Bang, but it might have been something like that. And so there was a beginning created, and we can perceive. It evolves because different objects in this universe resonate with each other, or they don't resonate with each other, and so they reconfigure themselves and become, bigger objects form out of the smaller ones, that kind of thing. So you have what we see around us, our computers, our cars, and stuff like that, made out of material that came into being. And we humans are good at also taking these configurations in consciousness and reorganizing them. And we think that they're objects external to us, but they're really not. They're actually represented in this other form in consciousness as a mental representation. We experience them with our senses, and we think that they're external to us. And that's how we get the physical world with all the objects in it. We are in this realm, the etheric realm, we exist at a certain level of vibration. But there's plenty more where that came from. And So one we've probably all heard about is the astral realm.
Mm.
People even travel in it, apparently. I've never done so, but at least not to my knowledge. When people step out of their bodies, as they report, what they're actually doing is the consciousness releases itself from the body that it's in and creates a new one at a higher vibration in the astral. And so then it carries on the way it normally does. The astral realm is also a physical experience, just like the one we have here, but it's at a higher vibration. And the same kind of idea would explain the spirit realm or other realms. So that there are other vibrations in existence that we can experience if we can raise our vibrations to match, to be compatible with the creations in those vibrations.
William, is that what hemisync does? Is that why hemisync, this sound from Monroe, is that what raises our vibration to a different level, so it's easier to have these experiences?
I suppose it must facilitate getting into that state. The thing is, you have to get into a state where you are not aware of your body, apparently. This is the way the Zetas described it. And if you can be unaware of your body, then you can leave it more easily. And that's one reason why most of us can't, I guess, is because we can't forget that we're in our bodies. And I know that's probably one of my hang-ups. I mean, I'm very much attached to this reality, and it's hard for me to get into a state where I am not aware of what's around me.
But regular meditation would do the same, wouldn't it? Because many people who meditate all the time will say, I couldn't feel my body, and it was like my mind was just, expanding. Some people are very good, some not so good.
Have you tried it?
Yes. I was sometimes successful, sometimes not. Well, my friend Imelda can lay down and that's it. So she's just lucky.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a genetic component to this ability to change to a different vibration.
Didn't Zeta say that the NDE realm, is the same as the astral realm, or is it the out of body experience plays out in the astral realm, or do we go there first before we go to the spirit world? Do they say anything about that?
No, they haven't really talked about that. I'm assuming it's the same process. That when you leave the body, you just go to a different level, perhaps. Like people talk about when they in an NDE, they meet people that are deceased, and probably you expect them to be in the spirit realm. So it's possible that there is that difference.
But in the astral, don't they say also that they see their loved ones? Cyrus and those people?
The Zetas, they talk a little bit about the astral as it's not really to be believed, basically.
Okay.
The experiences you have there are your own. They're created by your own mind, and it's less of an objective reality than say the spirit realm, I think. So what's objective is maybe the wrong word, but there in these other realms, there is a kind of an externalization of what's going on in your mind. But there are also things happening that are not an externalization of your mind. And Jürgen talks about that in his book in a couple of places. So I thought it was kind of interesting. So maybe it's majority rule kind of thing, you know, a consensus reality created by the people, the beings that are there, and you have difficulty interfering with that. But the Zetas also talk about what they call a formal structure. They call it formal. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that, but they call us, our spirit forms, informal, and they call the spirit realm and places like the higher, you know, places that we visit, they call those formal structures for some reason. And the formal structures have, well, they're basically an infrastructure. They support our being there. And so there are probably laws imposed on those environments that within which we operate when we're there. So although your mind can change what's going on around you, there is also a kind of a superstructure that they fit inside, or that they operate within. No, the Zetas, when they talk about the spirit realm, I should mention that they never enter the spirit realm themselves. So
that was my question. Well done.
They can't do it. It's well, almost like whenever you suggest that they enter the spirit realm, they get quite offended. And they say, no, we don't enter the spirit realm. How could you say that? And it's hypothetical. What would happen if you entered? And at one point, I did get them to say that that they would interfere with the basic structure of spirit realm itself. That if they did enter, that it would make it essentially inoperable. It wouldn't work for us anymore. And the reason being, I think, is because the vibrations are incompatible. They don't resonate with the vibrations in the spirit realm. And if they entered, they're at a higher vibration, then they would interfere. Higher vibrations trump lower vibrations, so they would interfere with the functioning of the spirit realm if they did enter. And so all they can do is simulate what's going on in there.
But William, you know, I know that they said the spirit realm was created as a container for our world, so that we could adjust in steps back to our natural state of being. But also they say, though, that 30% of incarnations on this earth are not from the human consciousness. They are from other races. Now, I cannot remember what I said, you know, when they passed, though, you know, like say I was a Zeta and now I die. Do they say, I can't remember, do they say anything about where does the soul then go? It doesn't go straight back to the Zeta race, does it? Does it also go first through the human container to the spirit world, or?
No.
How does that happen?
Well, you're talking about a hybrid being.
Mm-hmm.
That when the Zetas incarnate on this world, they do so in a human body.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost never alone. They're always accompany a consciousness from the spirit realm. They always request permission, put it that way. People should understand that they don't impose themselves on us. They communicate with the prospective mother or parents, and maybe even the child's spirit. And when they have this permission, what they do is they leave their own bodies back where they exist, wherever that is, and their body goes into some kind of stasis, I guess. It doesn't, takes a time out, and then it enters the human body with the spirit from the spirit realm, and the two of them together would then continue on to experience the incarnation. My understanding is that this is not just Zetas, by the way. This is a lot of other extraterrestrial races are able to do this, and they tend to be more observers than participants, and so the spirit realm entity is the one that's really in charge of the human body.
So, William, is it feasible? Oh, sorry, you've got my big name stuck here.
Yeah, we do.
Is it feasible that people who are way out of step with the current thinking, and I'm thinking of people like Leonardo da Vinci, and some of those type of people who were really very far advanced in their thinking. Tesla's another one. Is it possible that they are Zetas or some other form of race that has come onto the earth via the spiritual being?
Yes, it's possible. You got a 1 in 3 chance that they are. Or were.
Oh, okay, that high.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, but that's not the only way that this kind of information could come to Earth. I mean, we can get jogged telepathically by beings that are not here physically, and there's also the collective consciousness of the human race, which is being accumulated in the astral realm. That's the main function of the astral realm, apparently, is that it encodes all of the humanity's mental processes. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody at one time thought of had a bright idea, at some later time somebody else might come along and get clued in about that idea by some kind of contact with the astral.
Why is it that we can't tell these people amongst us? Why is it we can't, say, well, he's from the Zeta race, currently in a human existence? Or, I mean, what's the purpose of, well, we say 1 in 3, that sort of really set me back. We've got a lot of unusual people on the planet. I know that's for a fact, but yeah, how do we know? Do we have any idea of knowing?
A lot of people don't know, I guess. I have no idea. The Zetas once told me that I asked them specifically. I said, "So am I a hybrid?" And they went into some kind of state and came back and said, "No, you're just spirit realm entity." So I'm nothing special in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you'd think that I might be, because I've had the privilege of actually talking.
When the person passes, is it then that the ET consciousness just leaves and the human part goes back to the spirit world? Because a long time ago when I spoke to the Zetas, there was, we were all doing our origin. And I was saying, so where do I come from? And they said, you come from whatever planet, I can't remember. And so then I said, oh, so I wouldn't go back to the spirit world. And they go, yes, you will. Everyone goes back to the spirit world. But does the ET part also go back to the spirit world?
Part goes directly back to the body that they left.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It made no sense to me, but anyway.
Maybe if there are two components, one is from spirit realm and one is from the ET body, then it's not a big leap to understand that they each go back to their respective origins, right? So, but okay, the spirit realm is a little more complex than people imagine. It's not just related to this planet, this Earth. There lots of other planets in the galaxy that also have spirit realms. And these spirit realms are what they say, aligned with ours, which means that they're vibrationally compatible. And so when you go in a spirit realm, you're not restricted to this particular place. You can also go to these other planets and incarnate in those places as well. So it's more like one place, I think, the spirit realm, but covering a lot of different physical environments. So you can choose whatever planet you want to experience at that lifetime.
It's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you said about the ascension process. How do the Zetas explain the ascension process?
Okay, that's one reason why they're here. Why they do this, create these hybrid beings. They want us to ascend, which basically means forming a coherent collective mind in the astral. Right now, all of human mental processes are being recorded there, but it's pretty chaotic and it's not very organized. And what needs to happen, as far as they're concerned, is that the astral needs to make a big leap forward and become one mind. So like a collective mind of the whole race. So it becomes sentient on its own, I suppose. So that this doesn't mean that you lose your individuality, but that you become part of a whole, more so than we are now. And the Zetas want us to, they want this to happen for our own good, because we can achieve other capabilities then, like telepathy and memories of past lives and that kind of thing. But they also have their own reasons for wanting us to do this, because right now the human collective mind is so disorganized and chaotic, and actually it's the way it is now with our media worldwide. Our media is able to make all of us think negatively at the same time.
Yes.
This is to spread out into the I guess into the consciousness of the universe, and it affects other races as well. And so we're not just polluting our own environment; we're also polluting theirs. Mm. And they want us to get control of the situation, and the only way to do that is for us to form this collective mind. So that's why they want it to happen. So there are only two ways they can influence this process, and one is remotely, from a distance. They can telepathically try to influence what's going on here, and the other way is to become part of humanity and become born as humans on this earth. Then they have the they can then directly influence the collective mind in the astral, but they couldn't otherwise. And so that's basically the reason why these ETs are doing this. Mm-hmm. They can influence us remotely through humans. They say that, well, with this telepathic contact that they have from out in space, they have stations out in space apparently that they use, and they contact our collective mind via people like you and me who are interested in raising the consciousness of the human race. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of us around, and they work through us in order to help that happen. But it's still all up to us. I mean, the whole process depends on humans making decisions about the way they behave. Or yeah. There's a Pleiadian that drops in just to check on them to see if things are going okay.
Yep.
The Anunnaki.
Then the Anunnaki, he also dropped quite a lot. But the Anunnaki was restricted in terms of range. He's apparently only within range of the Earth, the telepathy is has a limited range for some reason, and
Right.
they can apparently contact us when they're outside of that range, but they have to get help from the Zetas to do that. The Zetas have technology that allows them to amplify telepathic communication.
Xavier mentioned something about the meeting of all the different races and on other galaxies. Would Zetas have been involved in those meetings?
Well, that specifically, I'm not sure, but they
Right.
talked about a council of races.
Yeah.
There's a group of them that get together to try to manage what's happening on the Earth.
Yes.
And the Zetas are not part of that group. They don't attend those meetings.
Right.
I guess neither do the Anunnaki, actually. They apparently don't like the bureaucracy. There is bureaucracy out there as well.
Yep.
And,
surprise, surprise.
The Zetas they call themselves a technical race, and so they're there to carry out the operations that this council asks them to perform.
Right.
That's their role in all this. They had a sitting where they tried to address or ask them what they would do if a nuclear war broke out on the Earth between the different countries. They don't interfere with what humans do to each other, typically.
Yes.
But in a particular case, they may try to prevent a lot of this stuff from happening because they're concerned about the Earth itself. They don't want the Earth itself to be destroyed.
Yes.
They value the Earth, and they don't think that humans have a particular claim to it. They think as much claim as humans do. And so they would try to prevent it from being damaged.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of enlightening, that we have to solve our own problems there. We can't expect them to step in and save us from ourselves.
William, do you believe that, because when I have spoken to Hans about this, Hans, who works with Kai, he was saying, you just think it is just affecting you. It's not. It's also affecting us very closely. And do you think that was the reason that they started to bring mediumship back 150 years ago?
Well,
to influence us?
The purpose, as I said, was for us to be able to create our collective mind. And when one of the sittings, I asked them, well, you know about this managed plausible deniability theory of mine. Well, it's not just mine, but it was based on somebody else's theory. That if you, there's a lot of things happening in this area that it becomes input to what we call a control system. They say it's a very loose control system because not everybody participates in it. But so if there is the way I understand it, there is a certain level of uncertainty that they want to maintain about what's going on with both the spirit world and the extraterrestrials. And so there's all this back and forth that we see about belief in in what's going on there is intentional, that they're actually if things get if we get too certain about what's going on, like if we know that the ETs are here and there's an undeniable proof, then they'll come along with another theory, say, or another experience that tends to counter this, so that the people are uncertain again. And the reason why they want this this uncertainty level to stay at a certain level is to give people the opportunity to decide individually what they want to believe. They don't want a belief to be forced onto people. It has to be an individual choice, whether you believe in spirit or ETs or not. So we can see evidence of that, or I can interpret a lot of events that have happened in the last little while that are consistent with that. Doesn't mean that it doesn't prove that it's true, but the Zetas agreed that this kind of a system is in place, and that there are some races that try to maintain this level of uncertainty. Well, I don't know if I answered your question, but this control system may explain why certain people, like, for example, Kai is being fairly successful lately in creating materializations, full materializations of people. And so, and then we had this experience with Gary Mannion, where a lot of people are convinced that you know, all mediums are frauds because of what was released about him. And so I see this as a part of this whole process, that we have good evidence that the spirit realm exists, and you know, that this other way of looking at reality is true. And then we have other evidence that suggests to people that it's not. And I'd like to point out that the actual truth or falsity of the events is irrelevant. You know, Gary may or may not have, you know, done something that people wouldn't approve of, or it might have been something else going on. Who knows? But the point is, it doesn't matter. It's the control system is aimed at people who haven't really thought about what's going on, right? So it's intended to bring people over to thinking that, knowing that our objective reality is not what it seems. And for those of us who've already made that decision, then, you know, we don't have to be influenced anymore. But for those of us who haven't, then it makes them think about it, and it does. They think they're able to think about it without being in fear of what's going on. I mean, the uncertainty is high enough that they can easily reject the whole idea if they want to, and without. So yeah.
Hi, William. I believe in both ETs and the spirit realm. I did see an ET. I was young. I thought it was a vehicle, but I've come to realize it was just a being of light. I was with somebody else at the time, and they saw it too, yet there were people standing next to us that didn't see it. I was wondering what you thought about that, why that would be.
Yeah, we talked about that actually, and they went into some detail. They said that if there's a lot of people there and they actually see a light in the sky and that kind of thing, then chances are that it's an actual plasma or some kind of physical phenomenon that they've created so that everybody can see it. But if only one or two people see it, then odds are that it was a projection into your mind, so that it wasn't you. It was there for you, but it wasn't there for anybody else who didn't receive the projection. This is one of their ways that they can influence the way we behave. They say they do it in order to make us behave in certain ways, right? They want us to do something, and they can only do that by making us think certain things.
Yeah, don't we know it? Don't we know?
Well, the other part I was going to ask you about is, I kind of believe in a fragmented spirit, that there is part of the spirit that stays in the spirit realm, a very high functioning part, and the others go back and forth in human form and other forms, and just it's a continual thing. past lives, future lives, concurrent lives, but not just coming to the earth, going to other places. And would these be some of these babies that our ETs are using or joining their spirits?
Well, no, you're touching on another process which involves just the spirit realm. And the Zetas call it multiple timelines. Now, that's a kind of a misnomer, because it's not really different time. Well, it is, yeah, there are different lives. Well, let's put it this way. There is this higher self in the spirit realm that you alluded to. It can break itself up into multiple pieces, you might say. The Zetas call them shards. Like breaking a piece of glass, you get a whole bunch of slivers. He calls them shards. And these shards then end up on different timelines, but the timelines are differentiated by vibrational state. So they are different times, they're asynchronous lives. They don't influence each other very much, if at all. But they are operating at different levels of vibration. And this maximizes the experience that the spirit can have in an incarnation. You know, there are multiple lives that are somehow or other all provide experiences to the spirit at the end of life. Each of these lives end at different times, you know, so, but I don't know what time means to the spirit realm. But after the end of the incarnation, the higher self has the benefit of all the experiences that the spirit had, or the various shards had on in these different lives. And it's possible for us in this timeline, and the one that we're in, to be aware of things happening in the other timelines. It's not, doesn't happen very much, but they say deja vu experience is an example of that. That you can sometimes feel like I've seen this before, I've experienced this before, and it's a fairly common phenomenon apparently. And it happens because you in your present, in your timeline you're in, can be aware of something that's happening in a timeline where similar events are happening. And so it's when that happens, you are aware that it's happening, and you feel, oh, I've seen this before. One might precede the other one in when they happen. So, but I'm not sure. I experienced something like this myself, and I'm not sure whether it's just given. This experience was given to me by the Zetas, because they sometimes do that. They have you experience something as a teaching tool. It makes much more impact when you can actually experience something that they're trying to teach you about. And I remember waking up, or not waking up, being half aware one morning when I was about to wake up. And I was aware of looking through my eyes, but somewhere else, right? So it was me. I was aware of where I was in bed. I was aware that my wife was lying beside me. But I was also aware that I was looking through my eyes, and I was seeing her in this other place. And she had the appearance that she had about many years ago, 20, 30 years ago. And so it was definitely not synchronized in time with my existence here because of the difference in her appearance. And so and the conversation we had was not consistent with what I was with my current life here. And for example, I was fully aware that I had just come back from Africa, where I'd spent a year or so, and I have never been to Africa. So it was clear to me that we were talking about things that I hadn't experienced here. And another similar kind of event happened in another time where it was closer in time, because we were talking about cars, and I was test driving a car, and I knew the year of the car, and so that I could compare that with where I was currently, and so I knew that the time was not synchronous. And so I take these as teachings from the Zetas to help me understand what this the use of timelines is all about. Mm. So what you described sort of reminded me of that. So I'm hoping that I covered what you asked about.
I've got a question.
Okay, fire away.
Okay, William, you say that the Zetas don't make themselves known within the spirit realm. Now, in your opinion, or have the Zetas spoken about when the hybrid passes and they return, for example, to their container, and the spirit person or the spirit half goes into the spirit container, is that spirit person then in the container aware that they were a hybrid and aware that they had been part ET? Do you know?
Good question.
Thank you.
I don't think I have an answer for you. Yeah, well, when the spirit person is in the container with the ET entity, often they're not aware that of each other, or at least the spirit person is not aware of the ET person. And so I suspect that if that's the case here, why would they? I would not expect them to be aware after they pass, but I could be wrong. You know, they go off in different directions, and they need never know about each other after that point. But on the other hand, the higher self should know about this because it was involved in the initial process. So it may well be, if we become aware of everything related to us after we pass, then perhaps they are also aware then what happened in that regard. So yeah, that's the best I can do. I have no information from the Zetas about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know, William, we had a very interesting, I don't know if you were here, a very interesting communication here when Paul came just at the beginning. And there was another medium from France here who worked with John Sloan. And so Paul was giving his first demonstration ever in front of other people. And while we were sitting there, the Zetas were talking, and suddenly Tom went into trance and John Sloan started speaking through Tom. And he was explaining to us that he had never come across ET. He did not know, he did not learn in the spirit world that they existed. He had never seen any. He didn't know that they had more resources than we had to help humanity. And then he was asking the Zetas on behalf of humanity and the spirit world to help humanity. Oh my God, it was just unreal. It was just an unreal experience. The energy was just electric. Yeah. And the Zetas say we cannot interfere.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a kind of a core belief that they have. It doesn't need to be enforced. But I think the real reason is that technically they can't. You know, they don't resonate, and they would interfere with each other's vibrations, and that would cause a lot of damage in the spirit realm. That's the reason why they can't enter and do anything. They talk about it in terms of our free will. You know, our free will is important to them, but I think it's because they don't want. I mean, yeah, it's important. They don't want to hurt us, basically.
Thank you so much, William. That's really interesting. I have read your paper, There's a lot that really is just hard to kind of integrate into our kind of knowledge that we know at the moment. But what I find interesting is there's a lot of resonance with the modern physics and what we're finding out about the universe. So, you know, there's certainly resonance there. I'm just hoping that, heaven forbid, if they can help us, because if there's any planet that needs help at the moment, it's us.
I'd suggest to you that you look at the books written by Bernardo Kastrup. He's written a very readable form. I thought it was readable anyway. About a mental universe, and he describes us as individual beings as analogous to a multiple personality. You know, you've heard of people having multiple personalities, that occasionally a different personality will appear. And so he uses that as an analogy for how we are a part of this cosmic consciousness. And I think it's an interesting way of looking at it. It's very intuitive. And the problem is that it doesn't go far enough. You know, he doesn't have different vibrational states, and so there's a lot of phenomena that he can't account for.
Just like to say thank you very much for coming along, and great cheers to Daisy, who is 4 o'clock in the morning at her house. Thank you very much, and thank you, Inge, for hosting tonight.